The native plants of Texas are the only plants for me. They grow high up in the mountains, cross the plains down to the sea. From Red River to the Rio Grande, Big Bend to the Gulf of Mexico. The native plants of Texas are the best plants you will know. Blue bonnets on the roadsides, persimmon blooms so blue and bold. Indian blankets, Mexican hats turn that blue to red and gold. There's a rainbow of colors in biodiversity, and the native plants of Texas are the best for you and me. The native plants of Texas are the only plants for me. They grow high up in the mountains, cross the plains and down the sea. From Red River to the Rio Grande, Big Bend to the Gulf of Mexico. The native plants of Texas are the best plants you will know. The native plants of Texas are the only plants I'll grow.
All right. And thank y'all for, okay, welcome. Now, the next time we play that, we can sing along because they'll have all week to practice on YouTube. So welcome to the Native Plant Society of Texas Native Plant Week kickoff. As you know, our mission is promoting research, conservation, and utilization of native plants and plant habitats of Texas through education, outreach, and example. And we're celebrating our 40th anniversary. We have a Bio Blitz this week. We have great speakers and a workshop on Saturday. And we also have the annual membership meeting and awards ceremony on Saturday. Before we get started, I want to give a big shout out to the Texas Master Naturalists who held an amazing conference last week. And many of our members in the Native Plant Society are members of Master Naturalists. They did a stellar job. I believe they had over 1,400 people attending a WebEx. It was very complicated technologically, and they did a great job. A lot of education happened last week with them. And one of our partnership programs won an award in Master Naturalist. So that's very exciting. The Pollinator Garden Assistance and Recognition Program, which is a partnership with Texas Master Naturalist Hill Country Chapter and the NPSIT chapters Kerrville, Fredericksburg, and Boerne, all have started this wonderful program where they can help you recognize what you have in your property, design a garden, and then if you earn it, you can get one of these beautiful signs for your garden. So they really deserve that award. And I just wanted to say, Master Naturalists are wonderful. I'm one, many of you are, and good job. This next week, we're going to take a little bit more low key and have 2 workshops a day rather than a gazillion. So, but before we go there, I want to thank the committee, the planning committee. They did a great job. Pat and Don Edwards were our co-chairs from the Trinity Forks chapter, along with their chapter members, Fonda Fox, Liz Moyer, and Andrea Marshall. And from the Houston chapter, Linda Knowles, past and future president, contributed. Cindy Kearney from the Dallas chapter, and then Bill Hopkins from the Cross Timbers. He's also an affiliate member, I think, in North Central and Trinity. So Bill gets around. And then, of course, I'm from the North Central chapter. So we all worked very hard this week to make this happen. And Pat and Don were great leaders in getting this together. So thank you very much. I'm going to run through what we're doing this week. We have a wonderful suite of smart, good programs from fun, educated, wonderful people. And let's look at what we're gonna do, and you can get your calendar out and check which ones you want to do, which will be all of them. Today, of course, we have Representative Donna Howard is going to talk about the origins of Native Plant Week, and I don't know what else, but I'm sure other things. This evening at 7, we'll have Sam Kieschnick, our Texas Parks and Wildlife urban biologist for the Dallas-Fort Worth area, is going to be doing iNaturalist BioBlitz training. So if you have never done iNaturalist, you really need to attend that and get on board with it. It's a wonderful tool to help us do research and understand the native natural world around us. This week, take plants of those native plants naturally occurring everywhere you go, and that will help us with our BioBlitz all week long till Saturday. Tomorrow morning, you want to get your coffee cup out, and you might need 2 of them, native plant coffee cups. Daniel Cunningham we'll be talking about Daniel Cunningham from the Texas A&M AgriLife Water University in Dallas. We'll be talking about the Benny J. Simpson Eco Park. And Benny Simpson was a founder of the Native Plant Society and a mentor to Daniel. So I'm really looking forward to his talk and learning more about their relationship and seeing the part of the park that Benny Benson actually had his actually had his hands on, and also the new expansion they have going there. Then at 7 o'clock in the evening on Monday, from the Texas Discovery Gardens, Carrie Gray Harrison, the garden manager, will talk about bringing Texas native plants to the Texas Discovery Garden at Fair Park in Dallas. And I think that they're turning everything over to natives. Let's hope. But we'll see what she has to say. On Tuesday, we have Carol Clark and Michael Eason speaking. Carol will be talking at 3 p.m. So rather than coffee, you may want to have a Snickers or something, a snack. And anyway, Carol will be talking about the historical uses of Texas native plants. And Carol's talks are always wonderful. And she calls herself an amateur botany enthusiast, but I think she's pretty close to an expert. Tune in and you'll see. Then in the evening on Tuesday, Michael Eason, who is on our executive board as chapter liaison, will be talking about conserving the rare Asclepias prostrata. And he is the conservation head of the Rare Plants Conservation Department of the San Antonio Botanical Gardens. And he's always a really good speaker. In fact, all the speakers are really good. Then on Wednesday, we go to the Hill Country, again, 9 a.m. Every time you see that coffee cup, it's an early one. So we have Kathy Lyles from the Fredericksburg chapter. She'll be talking about a virtual garden tour, her garden, I think, and giving us tips for managing hill country landscapes, which no doubt can translate into tips around the state. Then in the evening, the Kerrville chapter, I'm not sure exactly who from the Kerrville chapter, but maybe it's someone we know, we'll be talking about the Carol Abbott Garden at Riverside Nature Center. And now Carol Abbott was also a founder of our society, so that's going to be a wonderful program, and we'll be happy to tour that garden. On Thursday, we're back in North Texas, I think, at the Frankfurt Church and Prairie, an Awakening by Kathy Well Power, president of the Frankfurt Preservation Foundation. And she'll be talking about a prairie preserve around Frankfurt Church. And this is something that I think maybe all of our places of worship could do, is convert their landscapes to native plants. I think that would be really in great respect and support for our native world around us. We have Ricky Lennox, who is a fantastic speaker, wildlife biologist from the Natural Resource Conservation Service. And he'll be talking about restorations of native grasslands, how to plant and how plants grow and how to improve them. So you don't want to miss that. On Friday morning again, 9 a.m., Andrea DeLong Amaya, Director of Horticulture at the Lady Bird Johnson Wildflower Center, it says coffee time right there in her title. It'll be coffee time with some plant friends at the Lady Bird Johnson Wildflower Center. So be ready for that. Then in the evening, we're going to delve into our history with Dr. Camelia Mayer, who's professor and herbarium director at Texas Women's University. So the early history of our society and a tour of Texas Women's University Butterfly Garden will occur. So Sounds like a lot of fun. Now, Saturday. This is our busy day with 3. Start at 9 a.m. with chapter development about the Native Landscape Certification Program. Meg Ingalls, our NLCP coordinator, will be leading a panel discussion, which you don't want to miss because this is a real educational opportunity. And that is part of our mission to educate people. And you'll learn how to do that, I think, and how to make it better in this program. At 3 p.m., our annual meeting of members will occur. And now you're like, oh, a meeting. But you don't want to miss this one either. Seriously, you'll meet our new officers, then meet the leaders. So all of the executive board, we're not all going to talk, but I will talk about them, right? The executive board, the state board, the committees, state level committees will be introduced, and they each have a few minutes to talk, and we'll see who these people are and really bring these committees to life for you. And maybe you'll see one that you want to work on. We will have an in memoriam section. We have had submissions to our first ever in memoriam section for our annual meeting of members. And after that, we'll see our contest and we'll see all the entries. So that's kind of, going to end on a fun note there. It's all fun, but the newsletter, video, and photography contest, all the entries will be previewed at that meeting. And then, ta-da, 7 o'clock, we'll have the awards and contests. And we'll see who won and we'll see who got our awards. And so I'm certain our awardees will be happy for you to attend and see them have a chance to speak to us. And Bill will go over who won the contest. So now that's our week in review or preview. And be sure that if you haven't registered for Zoom, remember that you can go to YouTube Live and see these presentations live streamed all week. And now I want to introduce the Honorable Donna Howard from the District 48 in Austin of the Texas House of Representatives. And just as a preview, in June of 2009, Governor Perry signed a bill into law that recognizes the 3rd week of October as Texas Native Plant Week. The legislation seeks to recognize the role of native plants in conservation efforts and to create incentives for schools to teach children about the importance of native plants. The Native Plant Society of Texas, with State Representative Donna Howard of Austin, presented the bill, which passed unanimously in both houses. Representative Donna Howard has served in the Texas House of Representatives since 2006. She's a member of the House Appropriations Committee, and she sits on its Article 3 subcommittee, which oversees education spending in the state budget. We like that. And she is a longtime member of the Higher Education Committee. She is a native of Austin, and she earned a bachelor's degree in nursing and a master's degree in health education from the University of Texas. She's also served in her community as a school board member in West Austin from 1996 to 1999. Representative Howard was married to attorney Derek Howard, or has been married for 40 wonderful years, and they have proudly raised 3 children together. She is also a grandmother to 6, she says, perfect grandchildren, and I believe that, and is active in her community and church. So I'm going to now give this over to Representative Howard. I will stop sharing, and if you, okay, where's my cursor? Oh, here we go. Stop sharing.
Are we ready?
And we're ready. So if you're on speaker view, we have Representative Howard. Thank you.
Sure, thank you. And those introductions are always so embarrassing, but anyway, I really am glad to be here with y'all. Congratulations on the 40th anniversary of the Native Plant Society of Texas, and also on 11 years of recognizing Texas Native Plant Week. So I'm going to talk about that just a little bit here. Going back to the committee hearing in March of 2009, that was actually the same day I laid out another bill that had been proposed by one of my constituents, a 5th grade Boy Scout. It was to require nurseries to provide state-produced educational information on invasive species to customers. Just that simple. It was produced already by the state. There wasn't anything new being created. It was just making sure that this was going to be available in nurseries when people went to make their choices so they could be informed about invasive species. It was opposed by industry and never even got a vote in the committee hearing. On the other hand, that very same day, HB 1739, creating the Texas Native Plant Week, had unanimous support in the committee that very same day and ultimately passed unanimously, as you heard, by both the House and the Senate. In the Senate, it was sponsored by our current comptroller, who was then a senator, Glenn Hagar, and it was signed into law by Governor Perry. So since then, I've had the opportunity to pass legislation making the Lady Bird Johnson Wildflower Center the state botanical garden and arboretum of Texas, and to advocate for partnerships with native plant groups through the Capitol Complex Master Plan. I'd like to say we have made more headway in that area. I don't think we've gone anywhere near what we need to do, but we've been working hard to make sure that as that master plan is being developed, that we look at how do we incorporate native plant species on the Capitol grounds and get rid of a lot of that turf that we have there. I don't have to sell you on why native plants are so important to Texas. The ecosystem that we count on for our natural beauty is one reason that Texans are so proud of our state. And with growing concerns about interruptions to that ecosystem, we look to groups such as the Native Plant Society to help educate us and help us make better choices that will preserve plant life and animal life that's significantly tied to water and soil conservation, agribusiness, tourism, and our very economy. As someone who testified at the Capitol hearing back in 2009 said, educating students and the public about the benefits of Texas natural plants through a week of recognition will help Texas stay as Texas. So I want to talk to you for a minute here about advocacy and why that's so important and why this group is so important. You know, we have 150 part-time legislators at the Capitol on the House side and then 31 on the Senate side, but I'm going to be focused more on the House. 150 people from across the entire state, all walks of life, all different backgrounds, coming to the Capitol to make decisions about everything that state government is involved with. You can tell, I think, right away that means that we may know a little bit about a few things, but probably not much about a lot of things that we're called upon to vote on. We end up having typically 7,000 or more bills each session. And of those, probably 1,500 maybe pass. But we're in a very condensed period of time. We're having committee hearings and then voting on all those bills that end up having a lot of amendments to them as well. It's very, very rapid. And it means that we have to have relationships in place when there are things that come up that we may need more information about so that we can make the most informed decision. I say this because it's very important that you have relationships with those who represent you. It's very important that this organization is there to speak on your behalf. You don't have to have every single person show up at the Capitol, and we could talk for a minute if you want to about what's going to happen about whether the Capitol is even going to be open, how that's going to work in the time of COVID. But the fact is that you want to have these relationships in place. You want to your legislator to know who you are and what you care about and why it's important to your community. We are only going to make the best decisions we can if we are informed. And that's why I just cannot emphasize enough how important advocacy is. I want to mention one thing that happened in that hearing in March, because I think it speaks to the testimony too. And those of us that are in the Austin area have the luxury, if you will, of being geographically located where we can get to the Capitol. And I almost suggest that those that are in the Central Texas area should adopt people from El Paso and the Valley and the Panhandle and wherever else to testify on their behalf, because it is very difficult to physically get to the Capitol to testify for these bills that you care about. But the bill I mentioned to you that didn't get a vote, it still has an interesting example, I think. The chair that day, after we were hearing about this Boy Scouts proposal, And we heard a lot of people from your organization and others who were there to support that bill. The chair of that committee actually said that he had come into the committee fully against the bill. But because of the testimony, he was leaning towards actually supporting the bill, which shows you it really can make a difference. So it's very important that you stay engaged. And this upcoming session is going to be a real challenge. You know, there's obviously going to be a lot of competing interests, as there always are. There's going to be a huge budget challenge. And I know we're not getting into the details of session right now, but just a couple of things I think are important for everybody to recognize just in the big picture. You know, we left the last legislative session. We meet only for 5 months every other year, unless there's a special session called. We left last session having passed a 2-year budget that we're currently in that had about a $3 billion surplus. And then the pandemic hit and the oil prices dropped, and the comptroller came in this last summer and revised our revenue estimate. And now we have a $4.6 billion shortfall. There are going to be a lot of challenges of how we're going to meet the needs of Texans with less revenue with which to work. It's not all gloom and doom. We have some cushion. We have a rainy day fund. The Economic Stabilization Fund is expected to have about $8.8 billion in it. And then there are other accounting mechanisms and other potential revenue streams that we're going to be able to look at without even necessarily raising taxes that can help us weather this storm as we begin to recover. But we know that we don't know what to expect with COVID. We're going into the fall season now where flu is going to be a problem, and it gets colder and people are indoors more. The legislature is supposed to come back in January, probably one of the worst times to be indoors. And we don't know how it's going to work yet. I can tell you that we are looking at it, looking at our options to try to make sure that whoever comes to the Capitol, it will be safe, it will be transparent, and there will be public access. But right now, how that's really going to look is pretty much up in the air. But you know, there's a lot we're going to have to consider in addition to public health, maintaining education gains that we made, just addressing all the things that are going to be required of us. There are still things that we need to be looking at that are directly impacting the kinds of things that this organization is going to be focused on. You know, we still have issues, obviously, with choked waterways, with our wildland urban interface, water conservation, and much more. There are so many things that our state is having to grapple with right now that require sound, knowledgeable policies that will help us move forward and will recognize the ecosystem's involvement with the kinds of challenges that we're facing. So your voice is very important. And I would encourage you to make sure that your voice is heard at the ballot box on November 3rd. I'm going to close my prepared comments with a quote from Lady Bird Johnson that sums up the work of the Native Plant Society of Texas and why it's so important to Texans and to preserving the state we love. She said, "Wherever I go in America, I like it when the land speaks its own language in its own regional accent." I just think that's beautiful. So thank you, Native Plant Society of Texas, for helping us keep Texas, Texas. And I'm happy to have some discussion with you now.
I have one question here from Bill Hopkins. The question is, do you think that the Texas Park and Wildlife Department budget will suffer? Does it have a dedicated source of revenue?
It does have a dedicated source of revenue with the sporting goods tax, which has been one of those accounting gimmicks that we have used in the past, but that last session we changed in a positive direction. One of the ways that, unfortunately, Texas, let me first off say, Texas is required to have a balanced budget, and we do, but it's oftentimes balanced on paper. And one of the ways that it is balanced on paper is by not appropriating certain fees and taxes that are collected from you for a particular purpose, a designated, dedicated purpose, and instead of appropriating it for that purpose, holding that money back in order to help us balance the budget. Just to give you some perspective on that, the current budget that we're in is about a $250 billion 2-year budget. Now that's about half of that is state general revenue funds, and about half of that is from the federal government and others, but still a huge amount of money. Approximately $5 billion of that is being balanced on the books with these dedicated funds that are not being spent on their intended purpose. We had legislation, as I said last time, that said, we're not going to do that anymore with parks. They have suffered enough. Money is supposed to be going to our parks. They're an integral part of Texas, and we need to be able to maintain and operate our parks. So we had legislation with a constitutional amendment, I believe, that actually says those dollars will go to parks. So we won't be holding those dollars back. They will be going to parks and more. I'm sorry?
I said, that's wonderful to hear.
It is good. It's long past due.
Another question is, what are some of your personal interest areas relative to native plants? How do they impact your approach to gardening or appreciating native plants?
Oh man, y'all are getting me.
Oh, wow.
Well, I know there's some folks on here that I know who have taught me some things about it, and whose properties I have enjoyed because of their restoration efforts. My family has had property in Smithville for many, many years that was ranching property that a large segment of it was set aside, though, to become wildlife habitat. We're involved in my faith community with a retreat center that has a wildlife habitat designation. It's an important part of my circles, if you will. Personally, unfortunately, I moved not too long ago to a downsized situation in a neighborhood that has a lot of, what do I want to say, lawns. And
Yeah.
I have a good friend who is a landscape architect, and she helped me redo some of the property. It's not totally done, but to bring in some more native plants, to get rid of some of the turf, to make it a more inviting place for me and for the critters. I'm moving that direction, and I think it is extremely important. I have learned so much, as I said, from all of you, and because I did not know about all these things before, but right. It's clear the interconnectedness of everything, and if we don't do what we have within our power to do to preserve these things, the ripple effects are devastating.
Yes,
exactly. Kim mentioned the NLCP program, which teaches about native plants and also about some invasives, which kind of leads into the next question. How can we get invasive plants on the official list? The problem is there's about 4 plants on the official Department of Agriculture list. But if you go to texasinvasives.org, there is a whole lot more plants. How do we improve that recognition of invasive plants?
Yeah, well, I do remember that was part of the pushback when I mentioned the Boy Scout legislation. That was part of the pushback on having that literature available, because there was controversy that the industry had identified in terms of what was really invasive and what really wasn't, and how could we come to some common understanding of that definition. And I mean, the person that testified in representing the industry actually talked about the fact that there were some nursery owners who that's primarily the kind of plants that they sold. And so it was affecting their livelihood. I don't know what it's like now. That was 11 years ago. So I don't know. Hopefully things are better there. I think that I don't know exactly how to answer that with specifics, other than to say, again, this is where building those relationships and figuring out where's the best point within the governmental system to address that. Is it having somebody who's on the agriculture committee be able to advocate for that with the ag commissioner? Is it somebody on land and natural resources being able to find the right place to advocate? Part of it is going to be working with those legislators who are in key committee assignments that can exert some influence over what happens with the agencies. We've had a real hard time during this interim because the Capitol has been closed. We have had no interim hearings because we can't have those without the public being able to access our hearings. So we are feeling very constrained right now, most legislators, about what we're able to do. I've been referring to it as oversight by letter, because it seems like we have basically a letter a day going out from one legislator or another asking everybody to sign on to it because of some other issue that's been identified. You know, I understand that we've got an emergency declaration. The governor has been taking advantage of that and making decisions that he feels need to be made with his executive orders. But it's been very isolating for those of us that are normally involved during the interim with finding out what the needs are. So for instance, what you propose here to think about, that would be one of the things that hopefully we would be doing our homework over the interim, having hearings to vet things so that we're prepared when session starts to then either propose legislation or figure out some other avenue to make something happen. We just really haven't had that over this interim. So it's going to be a very strange session if we get to even have one. I don't even, I'm seriously, I do not know what to expect yet. But once we get the election over in November, we figure out who the new Speaker of the House is going to be. That Speaker of the House is going to then come in January when we actually vote on the Speaker. We'll be charged with appointing all of our committee chairs and those committees that we all will serve on. That will give us a better groundwork from which to start advocating for the things that we want to advocate for. So I hate to say we got to kind of wait and see right now, but that's kind of the status we're in at the moment.
That's right. One question is, it's kind of, are there other groups besides Native Plant Society advocating for native plants in Texas during the legislative session? So that was the question, but I think what I'm hearing is perhaps we need more specific knowledge of groups that we could work with to present information to the committees that you might be able to tell us about that could help us with some of these issues.
Coalitions are always really, yeah, coalitions are always really good because you start getting more critical mass. Mm-hmm. You have more opportunities that someone knows someone within the legislature, and you have those relationships already there and can build upon that. Certainly, I think that's a really important strategy to use.
Terrific. Would we be able to contact your office and maybe offline get a
Sure.
list of those types of committees that we might?
Of course. I'm happy to work with you.
And would the next question is, currently, what are the best methods for reaching out to our state representatives? Is that by email, letter, phone calls?
You know, all 150 of the House members are autonomous in their offices. So there's no one way to do things. However, that being said, I can't imagine that there's a single office that is not receiving the emails and phone calls and making sure that they're followed up on. I know in my office, even though my staff we're all meeting virtually now, we have regular staff meetings. We have regular meetings with constituents and advocacy groups. We have meetings with other legislators dealing with certain issues. And the way people are reaching us is using the Capitol email address and the Capitol phone, and it is being forwarded to my staff, and we do still follow up on things. So I'm pretty sure that's probably the way just about every office is doing it right now.
Okay, great. Another question. TxDOT has an online manual that specifies roadside vegetation management that seems to be ignored by almost all mowers. How can we get some education and teeth into the guidelines so that invasive plants are not spread by mowers, stands of blooming wildflowers aren't cut down, and no mow zones are created? Any suggestions on that?
A couple of things maybe. One would be, again, I'm looking at who is involved with transportation and has inroads more, if that was a pun, I guess, to TxDOT. And locally in Austin anyway, my first person I would go to is Celia Israel. And whether I went to her or somebody else went to her, she's been very active with transportation issues and probably has those relationships at TxDOT that could be used to try to find out how can we kind of get more conversation going there. What you also bring to mind for me though is that this is where having kind of multiple agencies working together with a statewide strategic plan is a good thing to do if there's a way to make that happen. So for example, one of the areas that I have worked on for several sessions now is with survivors of sexual assault. And those of you that have paid any attention to what's been in the news over the years knows that one of the big things has been the rape kit backlogs. Well, we came back session after session and put money into this. And then every time we'd come back and we'd see there's still more, there's more going on here. What's happening? It's not until you really look at the larger implications and all the different things that cause something or that feed into it, and quit looking at things in silos, that you can actually get somewhere. This last session, we were able to pass Sexual Assault Survivors Task Force out of the governor's office, and they're looking at the entire timeline. And I won't get into the details of that, you don't need to, but bringing together all the different stakeholders and looking at where are the points along the way that we're not doing what we need to be doing. How do we make this work better and make it be survivor-centered? That's an example of bringing together the governor, the AG's office, the health folks, the hospitals, the forensic nursing, the forensic scientists, the labs, higher education, the list goes on and on. The same thing could be done in terms of looking at how do we want to implement a statewide strategy that takes into account what we need to be doing at multiple junctures in regard to native plants. One of them being, what are we doing on our own highways? So it would be bringing together, you know, parks and wildlife and ag and TxDOT and whoever else might be involved, and saying let's not be working against one another. Let's find out what our common goals are here and what do we need to be putting in place, because part of it may be lack of emphasis, or maybe it's even lack of understanding what's going on. I don't know what the deal is with TxDOT, but this is again where you get people who know the agencies and can help us work with one another and maybe bring different stakeholders together to come up with something that will make more sense and that is not counterproductive, which is what happens a lot of times when we do things in silos.
Yes, absolutely. That's all the questions that have been submitted. Anyone else have one? Okay, guess not. Kim?
Okay, well, thank you, Representative Howard. That was excellent. I'm sure I'm going to be reviewing the YouTube and take better notes so we can cooperate with each other. I can already see lots of projects that I'd like to help you on.
Great.
Oh, I'm not. Yeah, here we go. How do I start my video? There I am. Nope, Bill has to do that for me. There I am. Anyway, it was a pleasure. You've educated me. I know now how I can work better with you, and maybe our society can work better with you. Thank you so much.
That's great. And let me just congratulate Elle again. Thank you for helping me understand things better. Thank you for what you're doing for our state. I mean, it is helping Texas stay Texas. Thank you.
Oh, we're trying.
I know.
Oh, it's good. We'll work together on this.
Great. I look forward to it.
I appreciate you so much.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Okay, so I'm going to do couple more things here. Have I not started my video? Start video. Am I on, Bill? Okay, so that was wonderful. I'm so happy that Representative Howard came to speak to us today. It has set a lot of wheels in motion in my mind. Tonight, don't forget that we'll have, or please remember that Sam will be talking about iNaturalist, and even if you know all about it, Sam's always fun to listen to and hear it make a presentation. And I want y'all to remember, so here I am, here's my motto. Here we go, right here. So during this time, this week, and always stay positive, work hard, and make it happen. We'll see you tonight at 7 o'clock. I think we're done, Bill.